Now, welcome to another edition of Marvel Cinematic Rankings, where this time we'll be taking a look at the results of the poll for Iron Man 2. We'll then compare those results to the other two MCU films we've done thus far to see where it ranks, before I then read and respond to some of your comments. But before all that, let me quickly point out that the poll for the next movie, that being Thor, is already up if you want to vote and or comment. A link to that and all my polls is in the description below. Alright, and now on to the results for Iron Man 2, where we'll see that 5% of people gave it 5 stars and thought it was amazing, 33% went with 4 stars and thought it was good, 49% of people thought it was about average and gave it 3 stars, 11% then went with 2 stars saying it wasn't very good, which left a final 2% to give it just 1 star, saying it was terrible. And so when we do all the math here, that means Iron Man 2 ends up with an average score of 3.28 stars, which puts it almost a full star behind the first Iron Man film, yet still a good half star ahead of The Incredible Hulk, which are, again, the only 2 films we've done so far. Okay, and before we get to your comments, let me just once again quickly say thank you to everyone who votes, comments, and watches the videos. It is all greatly appreciated. And also a big thank you to everyone who supports me over on Patreon and helps keep this channel afloat. That said, let's now start this off, as always, with the top-rated comment, which this time comes to us from Lu Hidai, who said, "I think it may not be a strong movie as a whole, but for me, it has terrific scenes scattered throughout. One of my personal favorites is when Rhodes, played by Don Cheadle this time, bursts into Tony's workshop and begins scolding Tony for his reckless behavior, but stopped when he saw Tony looking sickly and changing his arc reactor with it smoking without saying anything. The acting on Don's face was of concern and sympathy for Tony, like a true best friend, one of my favorite scenes." And you know the strange thing about this movie, as much as it's kind of maligned or not considered among the greats of the MCU, is that I think there are a lot of really good scenes, a lot of powerful moments. My personal favorite, and I saw a few others bringing this one up, is when Tony was watching the old film of his father and suddenly his dad starts talking basically directly to him or to his future son who he knew one day would be watching. And he starts by saying, "I have created this incredible technology that will literally change the world for the better and maybe more so than any other invention in history." But then he ends it by saying, "What is and will always be my greatest creation is you." And I mean, if that doesn't hit you on some level, maybe you should check and see if you have a pulse or if maybe you're a robot, because that is one of the most powerful scenes I've seen in a movie anywhere ever. But anyway, there are a ton of great moments and performances in this movie, which leads us to this comment from Joe Schnobelin, who said, "Sam Rockwell's Justin Hammer was by far the best thing about this movie. I'd really like to see him show up again, maybe in a series." Then there's this comment from Dante who said, "Easily my favorite scene in the movie is Justin Hammer's weapons demonstration. Sam Rockwell's performance is charming as heck." Then also this one from MC's Creations who said, "A for me. Although all the criticism, it still was a fantastic movie. The F1 racing scene was amazing. The end was fantastic as well. The actor who played Justin Hammer was beyond good. A, nothing more to say." We also had this comment from Daniel Reichelt who said, "Iron Man 2, you mean Justin Hammer 1. I hope so much we get more of him. He was the best, but not the only good thing about the movie." Then this comment from Hammer who said, "Justin Hammer is the best part of the movie. Sam Rockwell is an incredible actor. B for me." And I have to agree. I think Sam Rockwell is fantastic in this movie. He plays the absolute perfect sort of Tony Stark wannabe. I mean, yes, he has the same level of fame and wealth and fortune and all of that, but he doesn't have that charisma, and that you can tell is what he wants above all else, which leads to a tremendous amount of jealousy on his part. And maybe the most impressive part about the whole performance is he's playing opposite of Robert Downey Jr. here, who is playing the character you could almost argue he was meant to play. He was meant to be Iron Man or Tony Stark in the MCU, and not only does Sam Rockwell hold his own against that, but he absolutely shines maybe even brighter than Downey Jr. here. Alright, and moving along, we have this comment now from Matthew Chai, who said, "I get why people don't like this movie because it feels very cramped with a lot of different plots happening at once, and Whiplash was cool for the first half of the film, but was kind of forgettable when compared to Justin Hammer. But I still think it's a very memorable film to me as it introduces Black Widow and War Machine, and although the fights are short, they are really cool. I may also be a bit biased because this was my first MCU film I ever watched. Yeah, I watched the second movie before the first one. I'm weird." Also then we have this comment from Animator James who said, "This movie suffered from one main aspect. It had to set up so many plots. From Whiplash, setting up War Machine, Justin Hammer, who was great, Pepper and Tony's falling out, introducing Black Widow, setting up the Avengers, and Tony making the new element to cure his heart. They needed to focus on way less stuff because the movie can't do all that successfully in only 2 hours. They really should have had the Black Widow movie earlier to show the SHIELD aspect of the Avengers. Forgot to give my rating, I would give it 2.9 stars out of 5. And outside of the Avengers films and Civil War, which are meant to be big crossover films, I certainly think you could argue that this is the one time where story really takes a backseat to setup in the MCU. There is a lot going on in this movie, and I think, yes, overall, you end up with something better if you focus on a bit less here. Maybe Black Widow should have been introduced in her own film all those years ago, and it was a better place to bring in Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. and some of these other things as well instead of in Iron Man 2. Though that said, I don't know that you wanted to wait too long or have too many movies before you get to the first Avengers film, though you also don't want to be like the DCEU and rush as fast as you can to get to Justice League, and then you end up cramming way too much into just a handful of movies, though they were obviously trying to just play catch up with Marvel, especially after just how well Avengers had done and the popularity Marvel and the MCU was gaining overall. Anyway, I think we could certainly debate if there should have been one more Phase 1 movie that maybe focused again on Black Widow, maybe Hawkeye, and brought in S.H.I.E.L.D. and Nick Fury and did all that sort of stuff. Though honestly, I don't know that I'd change a thing about Phase 1 of the MCU. Even Iron Man 2, I personally think is pretty much fine for the most part, and does a good job of setting things up at the expense of, yes, sacrificing a bit of the story and not being the absolute best movie it probably could have been. Alright, our next comment up here then comes to us from Andrew Velez Figueroa, who said, "Iron Man 2 gets way too much crap. I think it's a very fun movie, nothing special, but a solid B." And I do think, to some degree, Iron Man has just become one of those movies where the consensus is it wasn't very good, and some people don't give much thought as to why, they just sort of go along with it because that's what everyone else says. And I'm not saying everyone does this, or that it's a masterpiece and everybody is wrong, or that the consensus is wrong here, but I'm one of those people, have to be an ass and have to get people to think, that will ask someone, usually just a friend, when they state their opinion very definitively about something like a movie, why do you feel that way? Why do you feel it wasn't a good movie? And to be clear, you can dislike or like a movie for whatever reason you want. Your subjective opinion is absolutely your own to make and to have. But if you're going to sort of declare something objectively bad or boldly say this movie is horrible, then you should probably know why you feel that way. And again, saying something is terrible or poorly made is different from saying you don't like something. I can think something is objectively badly made or poorly made and still enjoy it, just like I can think something is incredibly well made, it's objectively a masterpiece, and still not like it or enjoy it personally. Alright, and next up here we have a comment from Nathan K, who takes some quotes from the movie and says, "She gave Tony a very nice spread last year," and then yeah, she wrote an article on him too. Still my favorite joke, let's see them put that into Phase 4 of the MCU. Alright, and though I don't want to get into a debate or discussion about how good or bad Phase 4 is going to be, or currently is, or how woke it is and all of that, I will say it's a good thing that the start of Iron Man's story was back in Phase 1, and that it's done already, that it started some 13 years ago when things were much different than they are today in terms of what they'll put on screen. Because I'm not sure we'd get Iron Man, or maybe I should say Tony Stark, today as he was then. I don't know how eager they'd be to make a brilliant, rich, middle-aged white man who is a womanizer as their centerpiece of the MCU. Though yes, him along with Captain America, they are the two main characters of the first 3 phases of the MCU. They are the heart and soul of the whole story overall. And both of their stories personally are so fantastic and well done that I wouldn't change a thing about them, not even Iron Man 2. But if the MCU started today with a similar roadmap, one where they wanted to start with Iron Man, well, I don't know. I don't know what that movie would look like today, or what Iron Man 2 would look like today, or what Tony Stark would be like. I think things would be changed about it that would affect things down the road, like him being a womanizer at first, but then his eventual marriage to Pepper and their daughter and all these things that make his story more powerful overall, to see how far he came in his life. I mean, he's a completely different person in nearly every way from beginning to end, and it's done in such a gradual and believable way that it's a truly inspiring story to behold, And that's one of the reasons why we do watch or read stories, to see or be reminded that yes, people can change, they can become better. But you do almost get this feeling that Hollywood today has forgotten that. They seem to think not showing something, or maybe showing something, will just magically make the world better, or something just magically go away. The mindset today would be, we can't show Tony Stark as a womanizer because that would encourage others to be like him, instead of giving us a story where he starts off that way, but slowly over time realizes that he loves Pepper above all others, and that she is the one thing that's going to make him truly happy, not sleeping with every hot woman he comes across. Basically, they don't subtly try to teach us lessons anymore, they just try to hit us over the head with them. But anyway, I'm getting off topic, so let's begin to wrap this up with just a few final comments, starting with this one from Puppetmaster1791, who said, "A step down from the first Iron Man movie, but still decent enough for an action flick." Then this one from The Senate, who said, "This movie gets a bad rap. Perhaps it's average as a standalone film, but in the broader context of the MCU, it is arguably the single most important movie of the franchise. Everything that came after it would not be possible without it." Also, then we have a comment here from Tom Lindekild, who said, "I feel like I'm alone in this, but subjectively, I actually really adore Iron Man 2. It has its flaws for sure, but I'd still say it's among my favorites in the MCU, not to mention it introduced Black Widow and had Don Cheadle's Rhodey, two of my personal favorite characters." Next up, this one from Video Void TV, who said, "While it has a messy plot and meanders a bit, Iron Man 2 has some of my favorite moments and scenes in all of the MCU. Justin Hammer makes this movie a 4 out of 5 by himself, LOL." And finally, here we have this comment from PK Extra, who said, "Everyone is always very hard on this movie. It was a very timely sequel with the events from the first film still affecting Tony's health. And seeing him invent, or at least reinvent, a new element was still impressive, even if it was poorly done, but how else would average writers come up with such a feat? Of course, Whiplash did fall short, and Hammer should have been a bigger threat, but the drama with Rhodey and the government is still really enjoyable, and the first 30 minutes and the racetrack scene are all great." Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think of Iron Man 2, or what you think of what I or anyone else had to say about it here in this video. Or you can go and vote and comment on Thor. A link to it is in the description below. Either way, do leave a comment somewhere and let's talk some Marvel. And until next time, thanks for watching.